we will be showing in a way that will not interfere with the activities of the exhibit area from the video here, a videotape tonight. It will be a videotape of an interview with a lady named Arizona Wilder, and the interviewer is David Icke, and it has to do with what she has to say about the world governmental situation and a lot of that. So there will be varied activities available to you, and that will start about 7 o'clock here and will run for a couple hours perhaps. And it's extracurricular, but if you wish to come up front, because we're not going to turn the sound on very loudly, and you can do that or participate in the workshops of your choice. Plus, or deal with the people in the exhibit area. All right, if we are ready, we want to move on. I think this will follow up in a somewhat different and a somewhat similar way as to what you have just heard. If you looked at the program, it's not exactly the title that Barbara gave to me. Barbara Nicholson will be our speaker and our presenter next. But it's something that just hit me as she told me a little bit of her story. And so I used my title because I didn't have hers yet when the program was printed. I called it Horses, Hopis, and Prophecy. Barbara has been one of these people that has been probably selected to reveal some things that have been revealed to her during the past few years. In that same process, she seems to have a remarkable ability with animals, and she will tell you her story about her horse and her horses. She has a lot of horses, but she has this one special horse that's been communicating with her over a period of time. So I think you're going to really enjoy Barbara Nicholson. Welcome her this afternoon. Will you please?
Good afternoon. All my life, I've loved animals. I think it's just one of those things that started out that I really enjoyed. When I was a little child, my parents would go out, and we'd go out for these riding trips across the country and fun in the car. And I got to sit in the back seat, and I'd look out along the side, and I would see different animals, especially horses. I loved horses. I was one of these kids that was crazy about horses. And as I'd see them, I'd think, oh, they're beautiful. They're magnificent. I wonder what they're all about. I wonder if I could talk to them. And I remember one time having this wonderful feeling of love just welling up within me. And I reached out and I said to these horses, I said, run alongside the car. Run with me. Run along the car. And I looked over and the horses started running. And I was just thrilled. You can imagine, as a child, I thought, did I do this? Did this just happen? Did they hear me? So the next time we were riding along another field of horses, I kept looking for them, came up, and I again reached out with love and, oh, run with me. You're so beautiful. Please come run with me. And they ran. Well, this went on for some time, and I noticed the first time my mother kind of whooped with surprise, and she said, oh, look at those horses running. And after several times, she says to my father, you know, it's unusual. Every time we drive down the road, the horses seem to run along the car. Isn't that unusual? And I said, Mother, I'm doing that. I'm talking to them. And she turned around and she says, you know, Barbara, it's nice to have a good imagination, but let's not carry it too far. And as a child, I was crushed. I thought, I can't do this. I didn't do it. It didn't happen. So I thought, I'll show her. I was angry, a little resentful. I'll show her. And I said, run with me. Nothing happened. And for a long time, the horses didn't run. And I couldn't figure out what was the problem. Why didn't they run now? What had I done? What kind of a barrier had I put across my mind? What had happened? Was it me? And I finally figured out that it was me. I did it. And when I figured that out, I realized I had to be full of love, a very special kind of love, so that the horses would run with me. And when I felt that love again, the horses started running, but I learned to keep my mouth shut. And that followed for a long time through my life. Whatever I did with animals was within myself. I just wouldn't open up. But I started studying a little bit. I did a little genealogy. I wanted to find out who I came from and where I went. And I discovered there was someone that taught me just a little bit about my past. This was a king, is in my past. His name was Robert de Bruce of Scotland. And he was an ancient, one of my progenitors. And he was chased all over Scotland because he was trying to free Scotland from the English rule. And they ran him back across he was crowned in 1306. And by 1307, the English had him run clear to Ireland. And he was defeated time after time. And he had 6 huge battles in which he lost each battle. And one night, while he was on a little island called Rathlin between Ireland and Scotland, he laid down, I think kind of meditating like some of us do, and was trying to make up his mind, what do I do? I've taken brave troops into battle. We don't have the food, the armory, the cavalry. We don't have anything to compete. We don't even have the amount of men necessary to win a battle. Am I foolhardy? Is my belief that Scotland could be free a foolish thing? And he sat there, and as he was looking, he looked up on the ceiling, and there was a little spider. And this spider was weaving a web between one beam and across to the other part of the ceiling. And he watched it, and the main web fell. And he watched it again, and the spider went back as the web had drifted down and started again. And 6 times this spider failed. And Robert de Bruce looked at him and he said, I think this is my answer. That spider is a message. That spider has a message for me. What he does on this 7th, if it's a failure, I'll take my troops home and England will own Scotland. And that little spider got up and weaved another strand. But this time it held. The 7th time it worked. Robert de Bruce got up. He went out and he summoned 300 of his best troops. And he said to them, we're going to have a mighty battle, but he said, I know we'll win. It was very similar to the time that Gideon went against the forces, a special select group. And he took those 300 and he went against a castle in southwestern Scotland that the English were holding called Turnberry. Kind of turn, and he won. And the battle changed, and he went on to win battle after battle until in 1314 he rousted England out of Scotland. And at that point, Scotland became a free country unto itself, and eventually that's how we got the United Kingdom. All for a spider and a spider web? A message? How important are animals? How important is their message? Little things, if we will become aware of where we are now on the planet, if we'll listen, this is the most important, critical time. And we really need to listen to our friends and learn how to communicate with them and learn what they have to say to us. It's not just them. I continued listening to this, and interesting things happened in which I'll go into in my workshop in detail of the prophecies that I've learned from the Indians, and a lot of the things that the Indians have taught about the things that are going to happen in these last days, many of them connected with the animals. About just recently, and I'm going to put this about a year ago, I had this really neat mare, and she was a big mare. She'd had 6 stud colts, that's the boys, and I wanted a filly. And I kept hoping for a filly, but I was on the road and traveling a lot, and my help kept feeding her because she was having a late colt, and she kept getting bigger and bigger. And I was very concerned about her. Finally, she had this little filly, and I was so ecstatic. We had a filly. I went running out to see this baby. And I remember sitting down in the grass and cradling her head in my arms, and oh, I was so thrilled to have her. And I talked to her and told her how much I loved her. And I stroked her head, and something really unusual happened. I bond very well with animals, but this was such a bond. She just reached out and grabbed me, and I could feel her so much, her love, and I could see that she was special in some way, and I didn't know why. And I knew it was time for her to get up and nurse, and I tried to help her up, and that's when I noticed it. When she started to try and get up, she was crippled. Her legs had been totally bent back against her little legs, her fetlocks, totally bent back because of the crowding and the space, because she was so large. And I saw her struggling. I looked at her eyes as she floundered around and tried to stand and would fall. And I noticed the courage in her eyes as she continued to try and get up. And my heart was breaking. I thought, how's she going to nurse? How's she going to survive? It was heart-wrenching to watch the struggle of this baby trying to stand. I didn't think I could stand it, and I thought, there's got to be something I can do. I ran back in and I called my vet. And the news he gave me was, Barbara, he said, I've seen babies like this, and when you have them like this, he said, you're just going to have to put her down. He said, it just doesn't work out. And I said, what do you mean it doesn't work out? He said, well, it doesn't work out for several reasons. He said, if she learns to stand, she'll stand on one leg and she'll drag the other. And if she drags the other, it'll break on the ground, and it will split open. She'll bleed, she'll get infection, and she'll die a horrible death. And I said, well, maybe she'll learn to stand on both legs. He said, no, it doesn't work that way. And I said, how about if we brace it? And he said, look, I'll come out. We'll see what we can do. But he said, I want you to be prepared to put her to sleep. So when he got there, we decided we were going to try and take her up. I said, I've got to save this filly. I don't know why. Something deep inside me tells me I've got to save her. So we took her up, put her in the stall, and he said, bed it down heavy because she's not going to be able to stand much. She's going to lay all the time, fall, and get up, which we did. And finally, we were able to help her up, get her to nurse. And she learned by nursing that she could stand, but she stood on 2 bent back legs. And finally, after several days, the left leg straightened just enough on the toe that she could stand, but the right was totally bent back. So I said, we've got to get a brace on her. I went a lot of different places looking for braces. At that time, the only one I could find was a calf brace, and we tried that, and it didn't work, and it fell off. And then I ordered a braces for a foal, and I got those, and we tried them, and they didn't work. And it had been week after week, and it was getting worse. And I said, what can we do? Now, Jim said, Barbara, I think we really need to put her to sleep. And I said, no, we can't do that. So soon he called me, and he said, I have an answer. Maybe it'll work. There's people at a hospital, and they have braces. They make them for humans. I said, really? And he said, I'm going to bring up the technical staff from the hospital, the human hospital. And here they came in their blue outfits. It looked just like a hospital. I thought, boy, all this equipment. everything you could imagine. My hopes soared. I thought, this is it. We're going to be able to brace her and get it done. They had a big piece of blue plastic in which they had to heat in a hot salt solution and cut it and wrap it. So I was holding this little baby and holding on to her, and what happened is they put this very, very hot, salty piece of plastic against her leg and stretch it out. Now, I could barely touch it. They had gloves on. It would burn her, and they would stretch and pull her leg. I started to cry when I could see the pain in her eyes, and I could feel her, and the tears started running down her eyes. Have you ever seen an animal cry? Especially a baby who's trying so hard, it breaks your heart. I kept thinking, she's got to walk. My daughter and granddaughter were visiting at that time, and I said, I don't know what to call her. I said, you know, names are very important. They're symbolic. Every single name means something. A name is one of the most important things that we can give ourselves. What's the meaning of the name that we give? The name to your animal, to your dog, everything. It has a meaning. In the beginning, when God gave Adam a commandment, he said, name the animals. Now that wasn't to go out and say, oh, I'm just thinking up names of all these animals. It didn't mean that at all. It meant that every single animal, the name of it meant something. If you know the name of what the animal means, you'll have a lot of insight into the message they'll bring you. An example, dogs are loyalty. Does that make sense? Dogs are loyalty. Cats are cunning. Now that's not bad, but they're cunning and they're very in tune with things. They're one of the most psychic type of animals there is. Dogs will lay down their life for you. A cat will think about it. Horses are an entirely different one. Horses are the neatest of all, and I'll tell you why. And of course, to me they are, but because of the meaning. And you know, it's interesting. The Indians have the same meaning. In my workshop, I'll go into this in detail a lot more about Black Elk. You've probably heard of the Sioux warrior and his vision of the horses and what that meant, and how the horses go through the sky. The horses are, and as it is in tune there, as you recall, in that vision, the horses turn into all creatures. Now, what that vision, that was just one part of the vision of the prophecy. We'll go into a lot more about that prophecy later. But that prophecy of when they turn into all creatures, what he's talking about is the horses are the spirit. You see, we have a physical body, and inside that physical body that we have, just like a glove, is a spiritual body. That's, each one of us has a spiritual body. When we communicate spiritual body to spiritual body. We're used to doing this communication like I'm doing now with my voice. But there's another communication, spirit to spirit. That spirit was there before, and when we leave here, that spirit goes on. It's always been here. Other people have talked about it. But the spirit, representing that spirit, is horses. It means vitality, horses do. Vigorousness, a quickening. When you hear the quickening, or you hear something talking about quickening, if you talk about it in the scriptures, that means that spiritual body within us, that body that's alive and always will be alive. That's what a horse represents. What's so interesting about it is that gives them the ability to communicate to us. Very easy, because they're in that spiritual tune. They communicate easily. So I thought, a name is so important for this baby. So my daughter said, I know what to name her. I said, what? She says, let's name her Ariel. She said, we saw the movie, The Little Mermaid, and when she got out she was named Ariel, and when she got out on land, she couldn't walk, but she learned to walk. And I said, that's a good name. It's got an idea that she will learn to walk. So her name became Ariel, And her last name became Valdair. And that was a word my husband coined, which I've used in my other book and also in the new book about Ariel. This is just 2 chapters, by the way. I didn't bring the entire book because it's not off publication yet. There's 27 chapters and it's a thick book. This is just 2 of them, so that it gives you an idea of what it is, and a coupon in the back so that you can take off the price of this off your book. But we named her Ariel, and the second name was Valdair, which my husband coined, which means dare to be valiant. So dare to be valiant, Ariel. We'll make it. And we kept trying. Well, I had to leave on a trip. Jim says, all right, we're going to take that brace, and he said, I'll come up and change it on Friday. So I left, and as soon as I got in town, I called the ranch, and I said, have they taken the brace off of Ariel and put a new one on? They said, Jim took it off, but he didn't put a new one on. Oh, was I upset. By the time I drove in, I was just furious. Why didn't he put one on? We've got to get those legs straight. If we don't soon, it's just going to grow permanently that way. So in we rushed. I rushed in there, and there she lay in the straw. And I knew why I hadn't put it on. The one thing that we were so afraid of, they have the tenderest of skin, these little foals, and it had rubbed gigantic holes. And as I sat down, I looked at these huge, open, draining sores on her leg, sores that went clear to the bone. And I thought, oh, no. I knew we were at a dead end. I knew I couldn't keep asking her to go through this torturous problem that she was going through. I sat there and cried with her and held her. And I knew I was going to have to make the decision to put her to sleep. And I got up, and I went in the house, and I thought, what does Ariel really mean? Maybe there's a message there. Again, I study etymology, the meaning of words. Many times when we reach one of these places in our life where it's a wall, we can't see anywhere past where we're going, look at the messages. It may be in the name. It may be in an animal. It may be in the meaning of something. And that's what I did. I said, I've got to see if there's a meaning, if there's a purpose. So I looked up Ariel in the dictionary, and it said, Lion of God. I thought, Lion of God, that she is. She's got everything, but it still didn't give me that something, that spark. So I sat there and I said, I guess I'm going to have to put her to sleep. But I didn't want to think about it, so it was one of those times I thought, I just can't quite bring myself to call Jim right now to do that. So I'm going to click on the television and see if I can find a comedy, something to get my mind off of this gloom that I was feeling. And I thought, as soon as it comes on, I'll click it on. I have satellite, so I have hundreds of stations when I make the click. And I was sitting there just waiting, something feed me with something else. I just want to hear something else. And you know how the words come out before the sound or the picture really comes on the screen? You always hear it. The words came out, and these were the words. A man was speaking this, and he said, and the meaning of the name Ariel is the Lion of God or Jerusalem. I sat back in the chair, and I thought, what are the odds of that ever happening? I mean, there a million, a billion to one that would ever happen. You probably never hear that on your TV, right? I was just absolutely floored. And I thought, she has a meaning. There's a purpose to this beyond me. I immediately went back out. And I said, you know, Barbara, you've forgotten to talk to her. You've loved her, but you haven't really talked to her. I sat down, and this time there was hope in my heart. And I said, Ariel, why did you come here? And then she spoke to me. And she spoke just like you talked about, because that's how the animals do speak. And she said, Barbara, all your life, you've had wonderful experiences with lions and elephants and bears and horses and owls and snakes. all kinds of unbelievable stories. And they've all had a meaning and a purpose and a reason. And she said, I came here to ask you to write about this and to bring these messages to people so that they can see the different ways to improve their lives and help them, so that they can also learn to do these things, so that they can also communicate fully and completely with us. Please, will you do this? If you will do this and write this book, I will go through whatever it takes, and I will sacrifice, and I will survive through this time that you'll do this. And I said, all right, Ariel, I'll make that promise to you. And I then went in, called the University of Iowa, and I said, and gave them a long story, one that we don't have time for because I'll go into that in the rest of the story in the workshop, because there's so many other things I want to get to right now. I did go, and I remembered back to another event that had happened that really was very, very important in my life. And that event happened in 1993. I was, my husband and I were broke. Have you ever been to that point where you are fairly broke and don't have everything you need? And my health was very bad. And we had just bought a farm, and we were way in over our head. And that morning he got up to answer the phone from his sister, because we really didn't have the money for the payment on the farm, and he was going to borrow it. And before he came out of the bedroom, he had died of cardiomyopathy, a heart attack. Just like that. I remember I said, my word, what am I going to do? We had bought this farmhouse that had a wood fireplace, carried the water. We were going to fix it up, of course. And here I was, halfway moved in, by myself on a farm, my nearest neighbor 5 miles away, and it was winter, and I had to chop wood, something I'd never done in my life, and I had to carry the wood in to get, I thought, this is ridiculous. But more importantly, I was depressed. I didn't understand why, perhaps bitter at that time, and my health was in bad shape. 2 weeks after his death, I said, I've got to get out of this house. I've got to feel nature. And I went out and I started walking through the woods. And as I walked down a pathway, lo and behold, right in front of me, a wolf stepped out. A huge, beautiful, silver gray wolf. He was magnificent. And I talked with him for a few moments, and he talked with me. And as we spoke, he told me I could go on. He gave me courage. He said, you must go on, and good things will happen. There is a purpose for you, and you've got to remember this. We're counting on you. And I was rather taken back, but it gave me hope. And I went back, and I thought, okay, I can make it. But my health deteriorated. Arthritis, bone spurs, depression, horrible things. And then a friend sent me out some minerals. He said, Barbara, you need minerals. You need vitamins. You need nutritionally balanced supplements. And I said, yeah, right. And I kept ignoring him, and my health got progressively worse. And as it did, he finally sent me some nutritionally balanced nutrition, minerals, organic, not metallic, and I took them. Within a week, my depression was gone, and within a couple of weeks, I felt good. I thought, this is amazing. I can't believe it. So I researched it a bit. Why would this be? And I got to find out that all the minerals have been stripped out of the land. There are hardly any left anywhere, and we're not getting the right kind of balance in our life. And this really bothered me, and I thought, well, where are these minerals? Why aren't they there? Are they organic? Are they metallic? And I found there are a few places that you can get organic. You see, when minerals are put in the soil, they're like an old rusty skillet of iron. You don't want to eat that. But if it goes in the soil and the plant absorbs it and brings it up, it molecularly changes that molecules from metallic to organic. And so when the cow comes along and eats the plant, or when we eat the plant, we get the right kind of organic minerals. And I said, this is great, but all the farmland is depleted. Now, this is one thing I learned. I went out later, and I'll tell you about it, and got loads of minerals out of volcanoes and brought them and put them all over my farm. My horses are doing great, by the way. But I thought, where can we find these right kind of things? Now, I'm going to give you something interesting. The United States is depleted of all its balanced minerals, and there's 72. Russia was depleted a year or two ago. China is depleting this year. Now, what's that mean? That means that they don't have the life-sustaining substances that's needed to produce food and everything else that we need. There's one place on Earth that there's a huge supply of these metallic minerals. Just one. Now, do you suppose that would be a pretty popular place when the rest of the world's running out? Especially with population? Don't you suppose that would be a place that everybody would be looking to and might want to take over or may want to control? Because it is really more valuable than gold and silver and diamonds and everything else we have. Because if we can't sustain the physical bodies, we're gone. Do you know where that one place is? It's an interesting place. It's in the Dead Sea in Israel. Ever wonder why it says in all these prophecies about Russia and China, everything coming against Israel? You wonder why? They know, the government officials know, and they know how important it is. Our government knows how important it is. We need to realize the importance of life-sustaining minerals in our life. It is important. I learned that and got healthy from it. But that didn't help my financial situation or where I was. But I realized there's one thing that is important, and that is to be thankful in all things. And I said, okay, that's good. But how could I be thankful my husband died? How could I really be thankful in that? And I worked at it. I worked at it a long time, and I accomplished it. Now, I'm not saying I said it, because that's lip service. I said I became it. I felt it. I finally reached a point where I could be thankful in his death. And when I did that, an amazing thing happened. My life turned around. Paid off the farm. I'm doing great. Have plenty of everything I need, because an abundance comes to everyone when you learn to be thankful in all things and be full of love. These are the two things that's very important. Now, during that time, I was busy trying to help people get healthy. So I was going to health fairs and seminars and all over the country, preaching the gospel of minerals and how to help people. And I was on a plane flying, and this was a few years later, flying from Phoenix to California to do the Health Expo. And I was going to meet some friends there. While on that plane, I sat down, I was all excited, and I looked up the aisle, and lo and behold, there stood my husband. I was totally surprised. He walked back, stooped down, and he said, Barbara, you're going to meet an Indian called Thomas. It's very, very important that you listen to everything he has to say. He's going to tell you about the last days, about what's going to happen to this country, about the things that are going to come upon us. He's going to tell you about the animals, about the things that you need to do. You will find a great friend. And I thought, this is unusual. And then he was gone. And I thought, gee, did that really happen? But I know I could see my sign as clearly as I can see you. And when the plane landed, I grabbed all my baggage and was hurrying like crazy and called the Hilton Hotel, and I said, here I am. Where do I go to pick you to get picked up? And they told me. I rushed out and threw all my bags into the little bus that was going, jumped down in a seat, and it's only a few blocks from LAX airport to the Hilton. And I took a deep breath, and I looked up, and right in front of me sat this little Indian. He had a headband and a feather. I thought, gee, that's unusual. Could this possibly be, And I thought, no. And I thought, he's probably going there because he had a little bag to sell some trinkets or talisman. And I said, are you going to the health fair? He nodded. And I thought, yeah, he's going to go sell something, feathers or, one of those things that Indians do. And so I said to him, I said, my name's Barbara. He nodded. I was waiting for a response, and I said, and your name is? And he smiled, and he said, Thomas. And I thought, wow. So all of a sudden, we're there. And everybody's up and starting to get luggage. I never saw, I know Indians are fast. He was up and out of that seat, because he only had one bag, and was down off the bus, and I was looking out the door, and I thought, he's going to get away. And I threw myself through the crowds, ran up and grabbed him by the shoulder, leaving all my luggage on the bus. And I said, Thomas, we need to talk. And he said, if the Great Spirit wills it. And I said, well, I think he's willed it. And by this time, he was off and through the door. And the guy's yelling, come get your luggage. So back I went, had to grab my luggage, and by the time I got into the crowds, I couldn't find him. So I had to go up to my hotel room and get all my receipts ready so I could get ready for the show, and it took me about an hour and a half. And I thought, man, they're going to be upset with me being late to come down and help with the booth. So I got down the hall, and here's 4 sets of elevators on one side and 4 on the other. And I pushed that little button, so they'll open. The door opened, and there stood Thomas. And he held out his hands just like this. I didn't know what to do. I just put my hands in his, and he said, the Great Spirit has willed that we talk. And I said, now? He said, no. He said, I'm speaking tomorrow, so if you can come, he said, come hear me speak, and we'll set up a time to talk. By that time, we were at the bottom floor, and he's out the elevator and gone again. Well, the next day, I looked him up, and I found out he's the featured speaker. And I thought he was selling feathers. So anyway, the next day at 3 o'clock, we got ready, and I thought, I won't forget. So many people came to the booth, and all of a sudden I looked down, and I thought, oh, my word, it's about a quarter to 4. I've missed most of the talk. I rushed as fast as I could, and when I got to this auditorium, there were 1,000 people in there. And every seat was taken, and I looked around, finally. Up behind a pillar in the back, I saw a little seat. I crawled into that seat and was like this trying to see. Well, he was close to the end of the talk, and when he finished the talk, he said, Barbara, I see you up behind the pillar. Just wait there for me. First of all, how did he remember my name? I'd never remembered somebody just asking me a name on a bus like that. So I waited, and here he came with a throng of people around him. And I said, are we to talk? And he said, not now. There's too many people. And they just kept hitting questions on him. You can imagine, some of you that have talked here, and when you get off everybody hits you with questions. Well, this is what had happened to him. So he said, why don't we meet tomorrow? He said, give me your room number, and I'll call you. He said, in the morning, we'll have breakfast. I said, great. So I gave him my room number, and the next morning, I was up very early, and the girl that was sharing the room with me, she said, what are you getting up so early for? I said, I have a feeling he's an Indian, he'll get up early. Well, sure enough, the phone rang at 5:30. I was dressed and waiting. And he said, let's not meet in the cafeteria, come up to my room. So I took my things, went up to his room. It was very interesting. I found out later, everyone knew we were going to meet in the restaurant, and there were thousands of people sitting down the restaurant waiting, and we spent 6 hours in his room, and he gave me not just the lecture, but he gave me so many insights into what's going to happen to this country, what has happened to it. We related because of the animals, obviously, and our relationship with those animals. He explained to me the purpose of it, and we talked. When he told me of the destruction that's going to come here and what's going to happen, and I'm going to tie that in my workshop also, and explaining some of the things that have happened and how this is going to be very similar to what happened at the time of Noah, and the things, how the animals played a part then, what they're going to play a part here in the last days. Gosh, time goes so fast. Anyway, he went on to tell this, and I said, oh, Thomas, I said, the things you've told me are so mind-boggling. I said, do you understand that I'm a widow? I live alone in the woods. I'm 5 miles from my nearest neighbor. I said, what's going to happen if this happens? I said, I'll be alone. I won't be protected. I said, should I move to the city or what should I do? And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, Barbara, don't you remember when you met the wolf in the woods and you spoke with him? I had never told him that. And I sat back and I said, how did you know that I spoke to the wolf? And he said, I belong to the clan of the coyote. The coyote, the wolf, are brothers. We speak. And he said, the language and what the animals will do in these last days is we'll speak all the way across. We will be, all of us, together. And he said, you need to do this. You need to tell these things to your people. It's been lost, so much of it from us and what we're doing. He told another, quickly, I'll give this to you because some of you may not be able to come to the workshop and get all the rest of the stuff, but I'll give you this one, a quick little prophecy that he had told me about. And he said, you know, he said, the moon for the Indians is where the evil spirits dwell and reside. And he said, and the moon is the dark side. We call it lunar, you know, which we got the word lunatic from, and some of these things are not so good. And the sun is where the Great Spirit, that's the Great Spirit's abode. And he said, now, he said, you know, when the moon passes over in front of the sun and hides the sun's light, of course that's an eclipse of the sun, he said, at that time an opening is made. He said it's like a doorway because the sun's light is blocked out over the area that falls on. And he said, and the evil spirits come down and come out. It's like a doorway, and they can come down. That's what I have left. Okay. Okay. And this doorway can bring them down. And I said, oh my goodness. He said, we would go into our kivas. That's a place in the ground that's like I guess you could equate it to a church, maybe, where they would pray and meditate and do many things. And he said, we would go into this area down. And while down there, he said, we would pray for this time that the evil spirits would then not be able to have their influence. And I thought about this when this eclipse occurred because it was interesting. Over England, the holy men, the priests, the different people, you could see them in robes out in the water as they were praying to keep the evil spirits from coming on England. But no one was doing that when the eclipse passed over countries like Kosovo and Serbia, and then it went ahead and passed over Baghdad, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, India. It's interesting that the strip that it went across, I don't know whether you remember, probably most of you weren't there at the time, and I wasn't, but in 1941 at Pearl Harbor, 10 weeks prior to Pearl Harbor, there was a full eclipse over Pearl Harbor. Now, maybe that's just coincidence too, but as he pointed out, oftentimes the spirits come down to an area that's troubled, and that eclipse will pass through that area, he said, and in that area later you will see a great deal of problems come upon that particular area. So we might want to just kind of watch those areas that the eclipse went over in the next few weeks and see what happens. I thought his description of that was very good. These are just some of the prophecies. He taught me to plant corn and the importance of corn and what it is. And I'll go into that and why it's important. It says in the workshop, and the colors of corn, which, by the way, correspond directly to the colors of the horses in Black Elk's vision, and how the two melt together in both of them. What I had done, book is the beginning, and I say beginning, the first 2 chapters, as I said, of the book that Ariel promised. That book is Horse Tales by Ariel Valdaire. I had to give her credit, after all. Wouldn't be there if it wasn't for her. And another one that I had done, and this book is about love. You see, there's 2 emotions. Everything we're guided by in life, in all animal communication, every communication with an animal is guided by one of these 2 emotions. And interestingly enough, same communication that we have. Believe it or not, we communicate just like the animals do. But it's on we call it sixth sense, just kind of an awareness, something out there that we know. When we learn to speak with animals and to communicate, we'll learn better how to speak with each other and communicate. The whole thing is about communication. So this is on love. This book I didn't know why I did it at the time. It was interesting, but it's on fear. This is about weapons of mass destruction, biological warfare, and what we can do and how we can overcome it both physically and spiritually. But it is a book of fear. The 2, by the way, are back there if you are interested in talking to me about them. Those are the 2 emotions that we work on, love and fear. You know, they're described in Scripture as the reins, the kidneys. Reins are those 2 things you hold in your hand when you drive a horse, and you turn it to the right, it goes right, you turn it to the left, it goes left. Those are the reins. We have 2 emotions. Do you know most of us operate off of fear? We're going to work on that when we get into the workshop. We're going to go over fear and love and how to move from fear to love and how easy it is to do that and how to do that so that we can communicate not just with animals but with each other. Because if we come from a place of love, you can feel it. It just radiates. Everyone can feel it. Now, as I was talking about that, I'm going to give you an example of that communication. There was a young man named Tom, and he had a dog he loved very much. It was a big German Shepherd dog, and he'd gotten him as a puppy, and they'd grown up together. And he named him Fang because he thought that was a tough name for a tough dog, and he was a beautiful shepherd. And Tom and Fang were very, very close. But one day, Tom got a wonderful job opportunity to go overseas, and he could not take Fang with him. And it was rather a heartbreak, but he knew he had to take this opportunity. So he called his friend and he said, "Can you keep Fang for me?" And he said, "In fact, I'll give him to you. He's your dog. But if I ever get back, I'd like to see him." And his friend said, "Yes, I'll take Fang." So he left and he went overseas. And a few years later, he came back, and the first place he wanted to go was he wanted to go see Fang and his friend. And he arrived at the house, and he noticed there was a huge, big, gated fence put up around the house. And on the front door, it said, or on the front gate, it said, "Beware of dog, do not enter, attack dog." And he said, "Wow." He said, he's really got Fang up there. And he looked through, and he opened the gate, and there he could see Fang. He was positive it was Fang. He looked and he said, "Fang?" And then he realized it was Fang. And he said, "Fang, boy, it's me." But this dog was growling and his hair was up and he was showing all the signs of attack. But Tom was not going to be convinced. He said, "Fang, I know you can remember me. I know you remember me. I loved you. I still love you. Boy, come here, come here." And the dog came up cautiously, still growling. But Tom kept loving and kept holding out this love. And in a few minutes, he and the dog were just almost rolling in the ground with love. Both of them just ecstatic. He was so happy. He was almost in tears. He was so glad to see the dog. Well, after spending 5 or 10 minutes with the dog, he decided to go on up and knock on the door to see his friend. And as he did, the friend opened the door and he was surprised. He said, "Tom, how did you get past the dog?" And Tom walked, he said, "That's Fang, he remembers me." And his friend says, "Oh, Tom, I'm sorry, I hate to tell you this." He said, "Not long after you left, Fang ran out into the street and got killed by a car." And he said, "I really loved that dog," and he went down and got an attack dog because we'd had some robbery. And I got one that looked like him. But he said, "This dog is trained to attack anyone that comes in the yard. I don't see how you got past him." So they communicated and enjoyed each other. And it was time for Tom to leave. And he said, "I think I better put the dog up when you get ready to leave." And he said, "Well, no, I made it in once. I can, we're friends." He said, I'm sure everything's fine." He said, and Tom was a little startled also. So when he opened the door to go back out, he stepped a few feet out, and the dog charged him in full attack. His friend barely got in front and saved him as Tom got through the gate. Tom looked back and he said, "I can't understand that. I loved the dog. We were completely together. Why did he do that?" The reason he did it is a principle of communication. When Tom first went in, he put his attention on Fang fully, but he had an intention, and his intention was to love him, and that love came within him completely from his heart. There was no doubt and no fear. And the dog radiated the total love, even though he was an attack dog, and he did not attack. When Tom went out, there was a little bit of doubt there that he could get past. That wasn't the same dog, and that small amount of doubt allowed the dog to be exactly what he was, an attack dog. And then, of course, once he started the attack, what did Tom feel? Yeah, fear. And that just caused it to be worse. Fear is one of the most incredible things we have. I had an interesting experience when I was a young girl. I went out. My father used to like to fish. And so we were in the Colorado Rockies, by the way, up to a place that, and I'm not going to tell you, but at that time it was called Maroon Bells. And they had some really neat fishing. And there's a hiking trail that goes off one side. Actually, it wasn't even a hiking trail. It was an old mining road. And it went way up to the top to a huge mine up and across the top. And I decided that afternoon that I would take my little Scotty dog, who was yappy and fun, and would go on a hike. My father liked to fish, my mother read, and I was bored. I was 14 years old. You know how that is, 15, you have to go on a fishing trip. So off I went up the side of the hill. When we got to the top, it seemed to, you know how fun, when you're having fun, all of a sudden I looked up and I thought, whoa, the sun is coming down, it's going to get late pretty soon, and I better get back or I'm in trouble. And I started back down the trail. Now, the trail was interesting. I thought it was interesting going up because I don't know how they ever got these mining carts around some of these things. It was straight down, 1,000 feet on one side and straight up on another for a good period of time around this winding area. And as I was coming down around that area and I rounded the corner, there sat a bear in the middle of the road. And I grabbed the dog instantly and grabbed his mouth because I didn't want him barking, but the bear had seen me. And I kind of slid around the corner and I sit there and I thought, now what am I going to do? It's going to be dark before long. We have a cliff on one side and this big the mountain going straight up. There was no way to climb up and over and around. I sat there trying to figure this out. I thought, is the bear going up? Is he going down? And he's going down. He's going the same way I'm going. That could be dangerous. Is he going up? And I thought, how am I going to get past this bear? And I looked out and looked around again, and he was still sitting there. I started evaluating it. The road was about this wide, and he was sitting very close to the mountainside. I thought, if I dared to go around the outside and that bear made a move or the dog jerked, I'd be over down the cliff. I could think, why wasn't he sitting close to the cliffside? Maybe I could make it close to the mountainside. So I sat there, and I realized I had learned long before with animals, they are either love or fear. And I thought, if we're going to make this communication work, I can have no fear. If I have any fear or any doubt, it's not going to work. So I sat there trying to figure out just how to do this. I finally got myself into a state of love, and again, you've got to be thankful. I thought, I know this bear is teaching me something. And really what he was teaching me that time was love and fear. And he was teaching me the importance of being full of love. If we're full of love in every situation we encounter, we can conquer it, no matter what it is. I felt this love coming up. I grabbed the little dog's nose and held him on one side close to the mountain. And I did something that I didn't really know why I did. I started singing to the bear. And I kind of sang a baby lullaby song, and how much in that song I was telling him. And I did it in a very sing-song manner, very much how I loved him and what we were going to do, and we were going to pass him on the trail, and that he would have a wonderful day, and that as our lives passed, that I gave him all my love, and that he would have a wonderful, good life. And I kept sing-songing this to him. And the bear kept his eyes on me all the way, and mine on him, and we sing-song. And when I got to him, I had to kind of step over him, and my hand brushed along his side as I passed him. Now, when I went past, I kept singing, but I turned, and the bear turned to look at me. And I turned, and we kept eye contact, and I kept right next to the cliff side, or the mountainside, all the way down around the curve. And when I was out of sight, I turned and hurried as quickly as I could, but I wasn't full of fear. I was elated with joy of having had that experience with an animal that could be very dangerous. Not long ago, I turned on a television program, and a man talked about how he talked with bears. And he said one of the things he did was he would do a sing-song with them. I thought that was quite unusual. So if we listen closely and ask, and we're asking our higher self, we're asking God, we're asking even the bear or whoever we meet, and we ask, what's the best thing for me to do? Where should I be? What should I be doing? The answer will come. It comes every time. This is what's so important about life. The answer is always there. Each story that we tell in here is not just a story, but a message of hope, of courage, a message that goes on. Before I get to my last story that describes our two emotions, love and fear, I'm going to tell you quickly what happened to Ariel. I really wish we could get into the prophecies. We will do that, though, a little later. If not, you can check with me back. Ariel is still there. She has survived. And if you read the back, the veterinarian at the University of Iowa said she was a miracle. And she was a miracle. She is a miracle every day. As I see her and talk to her, she came to deliver the first part of the message. And I'm here to deliver the second part of the message. As far as love goes and fear, and what it does for us, my son was at one time in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and while he was on a bus, he was there with a friend, and they were going across town. And as he sat down, he said he knew it would be a long ride with a lot of people getting on. And you see, not only do we communicate with animals, but we can communicate with people too. And he watched a man who had gotten on the bus sit down a few seats up from him. And he said, a woman got on the bus with a little child who was crying. It was hot. There was no air conditioning on the bus. And there were many people getting on, and the child was going upside down and around and crying. And Ken said, my heart went out to her, and I got to thinking, maybe I could ask her if I could hold her baby. And he thought, well, if I do that, she might wonder why I'm wanting to do that. And he was a little hesitant. But just as he was thinking the thought, this man reached out and he said, may I hold your child for you? And as soon as he took the baby settled down, stopped crying, was happy. The lady got off the bus, and other people came on with burdens and packages and bags. And this man would stop and say, "Could I please hold your bag for you?" Each one that came on, Ken said he would ask if he could hold their bag. He would give them a blessing and say, "Go out and have a wonderful day." He gave them something beautiful every time that he'd hand them back their package, something great and something good for their life. And Ken kept thinking, well, the next one that comes on with a bag or something that I could hold, I'm going to reach out and ask them. But he said this man just seemed to beat him to it every time. And pretty soon the bus was emptying off and all the people were going off. And he said, my heart was so full of love for this man, the kindness, the goodness of just doing a simple thing of holding the bags, of caring enough for every person that came on that bus. He said, I wanted to say something to him. And he said, but my Portuguese was very poor. And he said, I didn't know what to say, but he said, I wanted to tell him, so I wanted to thank him, to tell him what a wonderful person he was. And he said, I passed him, I was getting ready to get off, and he said, I knew I had to say something, and he said, I turned and I looked at him, I looked deep in his eyes, and I said, I love you. And the man smiled, and he said, I love you more. Thank you. Are there any questions? I guess there's no questions. Oh, we could have some. Is there any questions? Somebody has a question. Okay.
I'm Rick from Fort Collins, and are you saving all the prophecy information for the workshop, or is there something you could share now?
I can share some now. I'm not going to save it all. There's 6 hours of it, but I can give you some. I think one of the important things that I don't know exactly where to start when we're just starting somewhere. I think one of the important things that the Hopi had in theirs, I'll give part of theirs and the Sioux later, and the prophecy because I can't do both, was that in the very last days that you would see gambling throughout the country. Now, they have 4 world orders, 4 worlds, and we're going in, as far as they're concerned, from this world into the next world, the 4th world. I'm going to do this really quickly. So you're moving from this world to the next one, as far as they're concerned, and that's happening within this year. This is the time that we start moving into the 4th world. Then within this year, he put it in a time frame of between now and the year 2004. Let me explain something that he did say. The things that he told me, he asked me not to tell any a lot of the things that he had said until after his death, and he passed away in February. This man also, by the way, called all the nations of the world to repentance. This is his story is very interesting. Wish we had time to get into it. But he did say that we would see a time when we'd speak to animals, and it would be important. The reason it's important is because at the time of Noah, it says that in the last days, so will be the same as the time of Noah, the animals came to the ark, and if you'll read the book of Jasher, it's a book that was not put in Scripture, you'll find a place where the animals, when they appeared in front of Noah, they would kneel down, and the ones that knelt down were the ones he took into the ark. And it even tells of a story of a mother lion and her 2 cubs, a male and female, who all 3 knelt down, but the 2 cubs rose up against the mother. And so Noah knew to take the 2 on into the ark. It goes on to say, by the way, it also says some other things. It talks about the DNA in there and how people will change DNA. And they were doing that at the time of Noah, and that's why the flood. It's a lot of interesting things. We'll get in that in the workshop too. But at that time, the animals surrounded the ark. And when the waters rose to the ark, the people ran to it, and the animals rose up and fought them off, so they couldn't get on the ark, because there were a lot of animals. When the lions came, they came in a pride. They didn't come in one by two. They came in a bunch. So at this time, he said, as we come into these last days, the animals are going to be very important, because they will either be our friend or not our friend. And our lives may depend upon our relationship with them. They may do things that will help save our lives, guide us out of harm's way, out of safety. As these times come down, the importance of communicating with them is very important because of that. He went on to say some of the physical things that we'll see is that it will come down in one day. And it will come from one of the major cities. There will be 7 countries who will attack this country, and I'll go into that showing the map and how that's supposed to go, of what they came up with. Some of those countries that will attack, he said, would be Russia and China, Mexico, Iran, Iraq. I know Mexico's a strange one. And he talks about what's going to happen in that southwest corridor and where they're going to pour through. The purpose of the Hopi and their blue light, that's another thing I don't have time to go into here, and what this blue light is, when it was experienced, and how he used it to get through the UN, when he addressed the UN. He had 3 different times that he addressed the UN, and it was done very uniquely. The Hopi is the only nation, maybe I have to give a little background, the only nation that has not signed a treaty, and therefore they're, I've got 1 minute. Anyway, they have not signed a treaty with the United States government. Therefore, they're a nation unto themselves. And through a very unique story that I will have to relate later, they were able to, and it's also in the book here, they were able to then go to the UN, and Thomas himself was the man who addressed the UN, spoke with Boutros Boutros-Ghali at the time, called down a great wind that blew all the windows out of the UN at the time to show them the power of the Great Spirit, and said, you say you're an organization of peace and love, but you're not, and you've got to turn this around or you'll be destroyed. There were 2 others. Another one, he predicted the earthquake in California, and when he addressed the UN, said this big earthquake will come. The 3rd one, he went and he said, this is my 3rd and last warning to the nations of the world, turn to peace or forget it, and that destruction is yet to come. My time is up, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. There is a lot to it, but what this fellow had produced or predicted had been come true every time. Isn't that correct?
That's true.
Yeah, he had an unerring record. Let's be back here in about 5 minutes, so real quickly this time, so we can keep up with our time schedule and a few surprises.
There's a question of whether we should go to see Bob or this woman that just spoke. She seems to be really in the spirit, doesn't she?
Yes, yes.